Welcome back, everyone, to our study of Rachel and Leah, the wives of Jacob. Today, let's talk about Leah. I've always viewed Leah as something of a tragic figure. I guess I view Rachel that way too. But she was really the other wife, the wife that Jacob did not love as much as Rachel. And what could be more painful than that? But at the same time, when you look at the totality of Leah's accomplishments, it's really awesome. She's the mother of Judah, the forefather of King David and all the kings of Israel, of the Davidic line, the Messiah himself. She's also the mother of Levi, who is the father of all the priests and the Levites. Right? It's not bad, not a bad job for Leah. And so I felt it was important that we disentangle Leah, the other wife, from her sister Rachel, and look at Leah in her own right. What kind of person was she? She deserves attention. While Rachel is introduced with great drama, we meet Leah in a matter-of-fact way. In Genesis 29, verse 17, right, we're told that Leah's eyes were weak, as compared to Rachel, who was so beautiful. In Hebrew, it says, Ve'enei Leah rakot. So what does that word rakot mean? That her eyes were rakot. So on a simple level, the description of Leah seems to be quite negative, right? Only Leah's eyes are mentioned, while Rachel's overall beauty is emphasized. So it seems that Rachel is the beautiful one, implying that Leah is not. But there's also another more positive way to understand this. The sages tell us that a woman whose eyes are beautiful is certainly beautiful in other ways as well, right? The eyes represent the inner essence of a person. When you want to understand someone, you want to really get to know who they are, you look them in the eyes. Right? If you look at Leah's eyes, they were rakot, it says that they were weak, but really it means that they were gentle, that they were soft. Rach from rakot means gentle and soft, that there was something very, very special there, but might have been harder to see from the outside. Whereas Rachel was stunningly beautiful. You didn't see anything amazing about Rachel right away unless you looked her in the eyes, and then you saw there's something that's hiding there behind the scenes that's really truly awesome and profound. So the picture we get of Leah is that she's a pretty young woman, but certainly not as stunningly beautiful as her younger sister Rachel.
Are you enjoying this Bible class? Take your study deeper with Bible Plus. Explore over 200 courses taught by expert Israeli educators, right from the land where it happened. Get a free month trial using the code BibleStudy at checkout. The link is in the description below. Now back to your class.
As a child, and I know it's silly, but I always imagined Rachel and Leah to be like Veronica and Betty, from the Archie comics. Leah is like Betty. Betty was pretty, but she wasn't stunning, and glamorous the way that Veronica was. Veronica was always more alluring to Archie. But Betty was herself beautiful and ultimately deeply good, right? And someone who, as you read Archie comics and you come to recognize how fundamentally wonderful Betty is, even if you don't notice it right at the beginning. Now, the sages also offer us a different approach into understanding Leah's soft or weak eyes, an approach which offers tremendous insight into the world of Leah. So they say that it is written, the eyes of Leah were soft or weak. So what is meant by that? So they explain that her eyes were indeed actually weak, not just soft-looking eyes, but rather they were weak. She had weak eyes. But that was no disgrace to her, but rather a credit. Because what was happening? The background to the story that we're not told in the Bible. She would be standing at the crossroads where people hung out back then. I guess before they had local community diners. People hung out at the crossroads. And she heard people saying, Rebekah has 2 sons, and her brother Laban has 2 daughters. The elder daughter should be married to the elder son, and the younger daughter should be married to the younger son. Meaning, everyone was saying, right, that the older daughter of Laban, Leah, should marry the older son of Rebekah, Esau. And the younger daughter of Laban, Rachel, should marry the younger son of Rachel, who is Jacob. And so Well, she hears this. Now, she's never met her first cousins, neither Jacob nor Esau, but she starts asking questions to people. How does the elder one, how does Esau conduct himself? And she heard people would say that he's a wicked man, a highway robber. Right? And then she would ask, well, how does the younger one conduct himself? Jacob. And she would hear that he was a quiet man dwelling in tents. And because she heard this, that she seemed to be destined to be Esau's wife, the wicked Esau's wife, she wept and wept and wept until her eyelashes fell out. Right? That's why her eyes were weak from so much crying, because she was destined to marry Esau. Right? And the sages say that this really was the plan, that Rebekah and Laban sent letters to each other. These two, brother and sister, they were planning to have their children marry each other. First cousins marrying back then was not so weird. And really until just a short time ago. My great-grandparents were actually first cousins. That was very common among Jews in Russia and Poland. Maybe that's why I'm so special. Just kidding. But it was very common back then, and that was really the plan. And so Leah, when she heard this plan of her father and her aunts, she was so upset by this that she decided that she had to do something to change her fate. She refused to accept what seemed to be what everybody else was planning for her. She wept and fasted, say the sages, until her sight became weak. Now, I think there's something very significant here. Leah is standing at the crossroads. And I think that's significant, right? She's standing at the crossroads, not just the physical crossroads, but the crossroads of her own life, right? Where destinies fork, right? She could marry Esau and go in one very difficult direction, or she can marry Jacob and go in a very holy direction. Right? So she actively examines her fate. She's determined to find out what lay in store for her. And when she discovers who Esau really is, on her own initiative, she discovers this. She cries out to God to change her destiny. And she succeeds. She marries Jacob and not Esau. The sages say that all her life until her marriage, Leah stood at the crossroads and wept because of Jacob, whom she had heard was righteous, whereas Rachel never went out on the road. Therefore, Leah merited to be buried with Jacob, while Rachel's tomb stands at the crossroads. Because Leah was at the crossroads, she's buried together with Jacob. But Rachel never went out to the crossroads. She wasn't active. She didn't pray for Jacob to be her husband. She didn't turn to God in the same way. And so she does not ultimately merit to be buried together with her husband. Now, the fateful night comes when Rachel is supposed to marry Jacob, and instead it is Leah. In Genesis 29:25, it says, "It came to pass in the morning that behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, 'What is this that you've done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why have you tricked me?'" Right? When Jacob wakes up in the morning and realizes that he had spent the night with Leah and not Rachel, he's furious, he's cheated, and he's angry at his father-in-law. How could you do this to me? And the rabbis give us this very evocative backstory to what happened on that wedding night. They say that throughout the night, Jacob called her Rachel because she thought that she was Rachel. And she responded to Rachel's name. She kept up the deceit. In the morning, behold, it was Leah. Jacob turns to her and says, "Deceiver, daughter of a deceiver, your father cheated me and you're cheating me as well." He said, "All night I called you Rachel and you responded." So what does she say to him? How could she possibly defend herself? She says, "Is there a teacher without disciples? Did your father not call you Esau? And did you not respond when you took the blessings from him?" Meaning, Jacob, you did the same thing that I did to you. Leah pretended to be Rachel, just as Jacob pretended to be Esau. Jacob believed that Rachel was his natural destined wife, when it turns out that he and Leah are actually a lot more alike than he realized. Both Jacob and Leah were people of dynamism, people of change, people who act audaciously to change their fate. The blessings were supposed to go to Esau, and Jacob steps in and takes them. Right? Jacob is supposed to marry Rachel, but Leah steps in and she becomes Jacob's wife. Right? Jacob's identity, unlike Abraham and Isaac, it changes dramatically over the course of his life. And so too, Leah refuses to accept the fate that was granted to her. Now, there are consequences to this. It's not easy. In Genesis 29, verse 28, we read, and Jacob did so, right? He ultimately grudgingly agreed to what Laban said, that he could now work another 7 years for Rachel. He gave, after a week of being married to Leah, right? He marries Rachel, and then he's going to have to work 7 years after that. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her handmaid. And then Jacob also goes to Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and then had to work another 7 years for Rachel. Think about that. Because of Leah's deceit, Jacob has to spend another 7 years working for Rachel. And the Lord saw that Leah was hated, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And you hear that language. The Lord saw that Leah was hated. Right? In Hebrew, this snu'ah, right? It's a very, very strong language. Hatred from Jacob. It's shocking. Is it really possible that Jacob hated Leah? So some explain that no, it's not possible. Jacob did not actually hate Leah, his wife, but rather that Leah felt hated. She knew that she was the second-class wife. She knew she was the other wife, that Jacob loved Rachel more. There was no hiding that. And so when Jacob loves Rachel more, Leah feels hated, which is natural. Right? Think about a parent who loves their children. If a parent makes clear, oh, I love everyone, but I love this one more, how are the other children going to be feeling? Are they going to feel like, oh, I have love, they love me? No, they're going to feel hated because they're not as good as the other one. You have to be so careful. Even if you prefer hanging out, or even if you somehow love one child more than another, never let your children know. So that's one explanation. But there's a second approach as well that we can take here, which is that Jacob actually hated Leah. Right? That when Jacob, our forefathers, saw what had happened, that Leah had cheated her sister, he made up his mind to divorce her. Right? Some of the commentators, say that he went that far, that he was going to divorce her. But then God blessed her with children. And he said, what, to the mother of these, I'm going to divorce? It's just not possible. Once he had children together, and today that wouldn't stop people, I guess. But back then, having children, once he had children with Leah, he knew that he couldn't divorce her. But in the end, he admitted he was wrong, right? Things did eventually change. But at the start, Jacob actually hated Leah, according to this view. Right? And when we read this, we can begin to understand the terrible pain that Leah experienced. This was her life every day. Right? She escapes the fate of marrying the evil Esau, only to be married to a righteous man, Jacob, who hates her. What a disaster. But there's also a third view, which I think is very interesting, which is that the painful situation with Jacob, it led Leah to hate herself. That she began to despise herself for what she had done, for stealing her sister's husband. What a heartbreaking situation. My sense is that all three of these are really correct to one degree or another. That Leah felt hated, that Jacob did have some hatred for her, and that Leah also hated herself. But when God blessed Leah with children, her status began to improve.
Are you enjoying this Bible class? Take your study deeper with Bible Plus. Explore over 200 courses taught by expert Israeli educators, right from the land where it happened. Get a free month trial using the code BibleStudy at checkout. The link is in the description below. Now back to your class.
And yet when we see the way that Leah names her children, we understand that, yes, things may have begun to improve, but it happened slowly and over time. The children did not immediately solve the situation. Did not immediately solve this painful marriage. Genesis 29:32, Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, which means in Hebrew, Reuven. See the son that I just bore you. Right? Because God has looked upon my affliction, my husband now will love me. right? That was her hope and her prayer, that she has this beautiful baby boy, the firstborn for Jacob. Now Jacob will love her. Right now, my husband will love me, which are such heartbreaking words. And unfortunately, they don't come true. As we learn in the next verse, she conceived again, and she bore another son. And she said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. Shimon, Simeon, comes from the word Shama, that God has heard. Right? But we see here she says that I am hated. Right? The first baby didn't work, wasn't enough. It's only with the third child. She conceives again, right? And she bears another son. And she says, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, his name was called Levi. And so this only with this third son, Levi, my forefather, I'm a Levite, only with the birth of Levi, which means to accompany. Right? Only then does she finally feel that her husband is beginning to accompany her, that they're walking together. Here we begin to see a fundamental change in Jacob's relationship with Leah, a change for the better. And if you read these verses closely, you'll see that the only children that Jacob actually names himself are Benjamin. That happens last. He's the youngest of the children because Rachel is dying. And there's one other, and that's Levi. Right? It doesn't say here that Leah named her son Levi, but rather that his name was called Levi, implying that Jacob and Leah named him together. Right? They're finally together on the same page, naming their baby together. Right? Which means that this reconciliation that Leah is referring to, it's not just she who's referring to it, but Jacob himself is talking about reconciliation. He recognizes that he has to shift his attitude, that something here has changed. He has a newfound appreciation for the other wife, for Leah. So Rachel, nevertheless, remains the preferred wife. There's no question. But with the birth of Levi, Jacob finally overcomes his active dislike and his resentment towards Leah. Now Leah has brought him 3 sons, and perhaps now Jacob realizes that Leah is meant to play a critical role in his life and his family, right, for all time. With that realization, with that maturity, Jacob's relationship with Leah changes. Now, much, much later, at the end of Jacob's life, when Jacob is dying in Egypt, he says to his sons in chapter 49 of Genesis, verse 29, he charged them and said to them, I am about to be gathered to my people. I'm about to die. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan. This is in the cave of the patriarchs in Hebron, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite. So there they buried Abraham and Sarah. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah. And there I buried Leah. We were never told about Leah's death. We're just told now that Leah had died and that he chose to bury her in Hebron. Now, I don't think Hebron was convenient, right? He could have buried her wherever he had been. But Jacob, at some point, we're not told this in the Bible, at some point, Jacob had gone and buried Leah in the cave of the patriarchs, right? In the grave next to the one that was meant for him. Meaning Jacob consciously and with great effort went and buried Leah, right, in the place where he would be buried, so that the two of them would be buried together for all time. Right? Leah is buried with Jacob while Rachel is buried alone. Right? Jacob is not buried with the woman he intensely loved, but rather with Leah, the woman he grew to love. Right? Shira Tuckman, in her book, The Passions of the Matriarch, she says very beautifully, Leah's primary passion was quite simply Jacob. Her desire for his love informed her entire life. Rachel's primary passion, on the other hand, was her desire for children. She yearned for them above all else, and ultimately gave up her life bearing a son, Benjamin. Their burial places properly reflect their life passions. Leah is buried beside Jacob for eternity, and Rachel is buried where future generations of the children of Israel will receive her solace. What can we take from Leah's life? What are we meant to learn? Leah, like Jacob, shows us that we can change our fate. Leah did not accept her destiny of marrying Esau. And so she transformed the future of her history and all of world history by becoming the mother of literally half the tribes of Israel, 6 out of 12. And Leah also teaches us that even a painful life, an imperfect life, a life which is not something that we dreamed of as little children, right? We hoped that it would go in a certain way. We hoped it would follow a certain picture that we had in our minds, and then life doesn't go in the direction that we want. Right? Even so, that life can be deeply meaningful. Leah suffered from her status, her lower status as the other wife, until the day she died. And yet she nevertheless managed to raise 7 incredible children, her 6 sons and her daughter Dinah. She brought them to the world, these amazing, amazing people who become fathers of the children of Israel. And at the same time, she never lost her sensitivity for her rival and her sister Rachel. She persevered through the unideal life. Most of us, I am willing to bet, are like Leah. We're Leah people. Leah gives us strength. Leah gives us hope.